Welcome. Today we're going to be discussing the technique reversing circles, its execution, its history, some things you should know about its execution, and some things that can go wrong and how to fix or compensate for those things. So let's start out with some history. The techniques in the upper part of the system, a lot of them started in forms. This is no different. If you look at the name doesn't even fit to some of the naming standards that we have in the system. But once you understand its history and how it was part of a form, it kind of makes sense. So what do I mean by that? If you look at 4, you have reversing circles and circling fans. If you look at circling fans does this circle. I'll do it this way so you can see it. Reversing circles does this, which is basically just the reverse of the circles of circling fans. That's where it's got its name. So what happened was, you started out with 4, you had reversing circles, it was extracted. Once it was extracted, some things were added to it because there were other things that you could do that might be interesting to add to the concepts of the technique. The way we discuss that in normal terms is you have a short version, which is usually the most efficient version, which is what's in 4. Then you have a middle version and a long version. We're going to discuss all 3 of those as we go through the technique, so keep that in mind. The short version is in the form. The standard ideal version is the long version. Okay? So let's talk about how we start the technique. If you look at the form starts from what we call a non-ready position. There's 2 positions you can be in, non-ready and ready. Non-ready would be we're just standing here talking like this and I need to do something. Ready would be we're standing and talking like this and I'm going to do something. So in this case, the form starts from a non-ready position. That's why it's moving forward the way it does. If you start from a ready position, that changes the technique in a specific way. So let's talk through that. So if you look at calming a storm, I'm going to say calming the storm. Why? Because it's doing a circular motion towards me. And it gives us a very good concept of jamming, how to jam something. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we want to stop this prior to getting in front of that shoulder to stop the momentum and the power, because we have some physical attributes once we get above the shoulder and some momentum that we want to try and stop. This is exaggerated by the leg because the leg is extremely strong. So what we want to do is we want to try and stop that momentum before it gets going. So if I start from a non-ready position, I can jam it just like I did calming the storm. If I start from a ready position, I then would do more of a block than a jam, but then I would have to pick up a little bit more power. So keep that in mind. Those are the 2 ways to think about that initial starting position. So if you look at what's going on here, I'm actually blocking this way. Okay? The reason why is because it's a roundhouse kick. The roundhouse kick could be low, which would then pick up with the bottom leg or arm, and then it could be high, where I would need to pick it up with the top arm. But there's a problem. If you look at framing, we normally use framing in specific ways to elicit a specific response from the opponent. Like you'll see reversing circles, there's a whole bunch of different ones where we do framings in different ways. Now what we're doing is we're doing a defensive motion, but then we're creating a frame. So that leaves, if you look at what's going on, the middle and the left side is left open because both my hands are on the right side. So this is an example of where the opponent takes advantage of that framing. You can say it's purposeful, but that's kind of arguable. What it is doing, though, is exposing some of the problems that can arise with framing. It exposes the concept of usually when one side is closed, the other side is open. So keep that in mind also. So this is an example of that. So we go do the block, our universal, and he now takes advantage of the fact that we created that frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick that up with our actual reversing circles. We're going to do the parry up and the hit, and then we're going to continue and do it again. So we're going to do these 2, which is our circles. Keep in mind that what we're going to be doing here is contouring. We're not going to be doing this. We're actually contouring the body, and that's where you get your circles from. There's 2 things that you have to think about here. One is the defense, one is the offense. The defense is we have to make sure that we obey the rule of where we block in position on the arm as to relationship to where we are on the arm. So if you look at the rule says if we're on the outside, we want to be at or above the elbow so that we don't get hit. If we're on the inside, we want to be at or below the elbow so that we don't get hit. Because if we don't, we end up getting hit with one end or the other of that weapon. So in this case, since we're underneath, what we want to do is we want to make sure we don't go below the elbow, because if we go below the elbow, we're going to eat that elbow. So don't get over exuberant and go, hey, I'm going to pick this up because I'm going to hit him, and then go above the arm. Make sure you hit, and then we'll get into the specifics of what happens after that. Let's talk through the offense first. So I could hit him this way, I could hit him this way, or I could hit him together at the same time. So what we want to do is we want to take advantage of a diagonal which picks up both the depth and the height simultaneously, so we're using them together. And then we're using a little bit of a rotation of the body to get the proper alignments. Okay? Because technically this is backup mass, and alignments make backup mass possible, so keep that in mind. So that's what the rotation of the body is for, to get the proper alignments. The idea here is we want to put them back on their heel and potentially get them moving backwards, so that as we do this push, it begins going backwards, and then we want to worry about that block again, or the parry again, and then push. Now notice what just happened. I set him back on his heels, and in this case I did it a little bit more so that he can move, so that I can expose the part that's going on here. Notice I did not parry above the arm, I moved him up, so then I get to the grab. It's very similar to what we do in attacking mace, just done from a different positioning. So why is that okay? Because as I do this hit and he begins to move, I can then pick up this check with my right hand, so that I can contour up, don't gap, as we always talk about trying to eliminate gaps. So what we want to do is contour as we can now pick up a check on that elbow. So I've got that opponent going that way, so what we then want to do is reverse that, as we're going to begin to pull him towards us, and I can just pull with my arms, or I can pull with my body. What I want to do is I'm going to do both the arm and the body. So keep in mind, the form ended. So we're going to continue on to the middle part of the form, or middle part of the technique, middle length of the technique. So what we're going to do is we're going to come here, pull them, and then reverse it on them again as we begin to do this hit. So the middle length of the technique could be we get to this piece and cross out, or we get to this piece, do the hit, and then cross out. Either one of those would be considered the middle length of the technique, but we're going to keep going on and do the long version. So we get to this piece, we want to contour, pull them, reverse, again, contouring, and then contouring again. If we're going to do the middle length version, we would do this, but we're going to do this instead, because we're going to keep going through this technique to the long version. So I get to this piece, and now I want to do a wrist lock to take him down, but notice where my hand is. I have a gap here. I don't want the gap. I want a third hand. I want to put him here, and I want to use my body and the rotation of my body in order to take this opponent down. It's usually done with both hands, but I'm going to do it with one so you can see. So this takes the opponent down. There's one of three spots we can hit: groin, chest, or face. For this technique, we generally just take the middle, which is the chest, but you might want to do one of those other three based upon how they did their rotation on their fall. We continue this grab, we do that downward roundhouse kick. Again, we can use gravitational marriage to aid us. We then clear the hand out of the way, cross out and cover. If the hand happens to be in the way where you're going to cross out to, just step on it. There's no problem having extra hits if you need them. Okay, up. So that's the long version of the technique. So we've gone through the short, middle, and long versions. Okay, so let's do a quick walk through again. We're going to start from a non-ready position. We are going to jam, block both sides, but then we create a frame. What we want to do is we want to pick up the parry, don't put blade on the elbow, do the hit, continue with the second one, being to move them back a little bit. Now you can allow this to slide past the elbow as we don't gap here, we contour, we pull them towards us, reverse that as we do the hit, rear crossover, grab, third hand, take it over, downward roundhouse, take advantage of some gravitational marriage if you can get it, clear, cross out the cover. Okay, one more time, without any explanation, slightly faster. I'm going to start from a ready position this time. Up. Hope this video helps you. Thank you very much.